At 4,200 meters above sea level, where the air is so thin that every breath feels like a battle and no human should reasonably expect to find traces of faith, a lone climber plunged his hand into the frozen snow and touched something that should never have been there. An ancient wooden image of the Virgin Mary, her blue mantle faded but unmistakable, hands extended in eternal welcome. Buried beneath layers of ice and time in one of the most inhospitable places on Earth, this sacred statue became the turning point in a story of pride, peril, and profound grace. What unfolded in the days that followed would shatter a man's self-sufficiency and reveal the tender protection of the Mother of God in the heart of a deadly storm. Before we continue, share in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is there. Let's see how far the miracles of the Virgin Mary have reached. And if you haven't yet joined our family, subscribe now, because here, each day, we witness the tender love and mighty power of the Mother of God. Marcus Webb was 34, a professional mountaineer from Denver whose name carried weight in the tight-knit world of extreme climbing. He had summited 32 peaks, 21 of them solo, with a record unmarred by serious accidents, a testament to precision, preparation, and an iron will that refused to bend. Marcus embodied the archetype of the self-reliant adventurer, the kind who triple-checked gear with almost ritualistic care, who trusted his own judgment above all others, and who climbed not just for the thrill but to prove that he needed no one, not guides, not partners, not even Providence. Other climbers admired his skill, yet kept their distance. There was an invisible wall around Marcus, built from years of choosing solitude over vulnerability in the Colorado Rocky Mountains, where jagged peaks pierce the sky and winter storms can transform beauty into terror within hours. Marcus arrived at base camp on a crisp January morning. The thermometer hovered at 8 degrees Fahrenheit, the air sharp enough to bite exposed skin. Outside his tent, he inspected his equipment for the third time. Ropes coiled perfectly, crampons gleaming, every carabiner accounted for in military-like order. Tom, the veteran base guide with 40 years etched into his weathered face, approached carrying 2 steaming mugs of coffee. Webb, forecast shifted. Low pressure system moving in earlier than expected. Might want to hold off a couple days. Marcus didn't glance up from his gear. I don't need to. His tone wasn't harsh, but it carried that quiet finality that ended discussions. Tom shook his head with a knowing sigh. You didn't argue with Marcus Webb. His flawless record spoke louder than any warning. At precisely 6:17 a.m. on January 15th, Marcus shouldered his pack, adjusted the straps with practiced efficiency, and began the ascent alone, as he always did, as he always insisted. The first 2 days unfolded like a climber's dream. Clear skies stretched endlessly above, temperatures stable at a manageable 12 degrees, winds moderate and forgiving. Marcus moved with the fluid grace of someone utterly at home in the heights, his body and mind synchronized in that rare state where every decision felt instinctive and right. By the end of the first day, he had gained 3,100 meters, pitching his tent on a sheltered rocky ledge. He ate methodically, reviewed his GPS coordinates, and slept deeply beneath a canopy of stars that seemed close enough to touch. Day 2 proved even better. The mountains seemed to welcome him, rock and ice yielding to his skill. Around 4 in the afternoon, he paused at 3,800 meters for water, gazing down at the tiny speck of base camp far below. A faint smile touched his lips. He had been right to push on, as always. With hours of daylight remaining, he chose caution over ambition, setting up camp early. Tomorrow he would reach his goal of 4,200 meters, claim another solo victory, and descend on schedule. He ate his freeze-dried meal without rush, inspected tomorrow's gear by headlamp, and settled in as the sun dipped behind western peaks, painting the snow in fiery hues of orange and rose. In Catholic tradition, mountains have long been places of divine encounter. Think of Moses on Sinai receiving the tablets, or Elijah hearing the still small voice amid the tempest. Devotion to the Virgin Mary flourishes especially among those who face nature's extremes. Sailors invoke her as Star of the Sea, and mountaineers in the Alps have carried her image for centuries, leaving small statues in cairns or crevices as acts of gratitude or pleas for protection. Our Lady of the Snows, celebrated each August, reminds the faithful of Mary's role in blanketing the world in grace even amid winter's harshness. Marcus, raised loosely Catholic but long drifted from faith, knew none of this consciously. Yet something greater was already watching over the solitary figure on that high ledge, as the night deepened and unseen forces gathered. The night on that high ledge passed in deceptive peace, the mountain air crisp and still as Marcus drifted into the deep, restorative sleep of the physically spent. Yet around 2:30 in the morning, he jolted awake to a sound that cut through the silence like a warning, a deep, relentless roar that wasn't the familiar whisper of wind across snow. His watch glowed faintly in the dark. 2:33 a.m. Unzipping the tent just enough to peer out, he saw nothing but absolute blackness, the kind that swallows headlamp beams whole. But he felt the change viscerally. The temperature had plummeted, and the wind now howled with a ferocity that shook the tent fabric like a living thing. Closing the flap, Marcus checked his barometer. The pressure had crashed dramatically. Tom's warning about the low-pressure system had been spot on. Only it arrived far sooner and fiercer than any forecast predicted. Sleep evaded him now. The storm intensified with every passing minute, gusts battering the tent until the poles groaned in protest. At 5 o'clock, when he would normally rise to prepare for the day's climb, Marcus emerged into a transformed world. Snow fell in dense, blinding sheets, reducing visibility to mere meters. Winds gusted at 70, perhaps 80 kilometers per hour, driving crystals like needles against exposed skin. The thermometer read -18 degrees Fahrenheit, with wind chill plunging toward -35, a lethal combination where frostbite could claim fingers in minutes. He stood there assessing for a full 5 minutes, breath fogging in rapid clouds. Logic screamed to descend immediately, to retreat to his previous camp at 3,100 meters and wait out the fury. It was the safe call, the one any prudent climber would make. But Marcus Webb did not retreat. Progress lost was pride wounded, and pride had long been his compass. Gazing upward through the whiteout, he glimpsed faint outlines of rock formations marking the route to 4,000 meters. Decision made. He would push on a few hours more, reassess, and dig in if needed. It was the first grave misjudgment. For the next 6 hours, Marcus battled conditions worse than any in his extensive career. Each step required Herculean effort, kicking through deepening drifts while the wind sought to hurl him backward. Snow accumulated relentlessly, erasing his tracks almost instantly. By midday, though the gray uniformity of sky made time meaningless, danger signs mounted. His fingers grew numb despite top-grade thermal gloves, thoughts slowing like syrup in the cold. Disorientation crept in. The GPS insisted only 150 meters remained to a safer zone, yet he saw nothing but endless white. Shelter became imperative. Any overhang, any windbreak. Desperation drove him to dig with his axe, but the snow was compacted iron-hard, yielding only centimeters before exhaustion forced him down. Hands bled where ice shards sliced through glove palms. Collapsing to his knees at around 4,150 meters, Marcus confronted the abyss, muscles failing, core temperature dropping into moderate hypothermia. 20 minutes, perhaps less, before severe stages set in, confusion deepening to delirium, then unconsciousness, then death within hours. You know that shattering moment when control slips away entirely, when all the skill and preparation in the world mean nothing against nature's indifference. Marcus lived it there, alone on the vast, unforgiving slope. Trying to rise, he fell sideways, his right arm plunging deep into the snow. Not the shallow resistance expected, but a sudden void beneath. Something solid met his grasp, not rock, but wood. With the last surges of adrenaline, he clawed frantically, unearthing faded blue beneath layers of ice. A carved wooden statue of the Virgin Mary, perhaps 40 centimeters tall, oak darkened by time, her mantle painted in remnants of deep azure, face serene, hands outstretched in gentle invitation. Marcus knelt transfixed, mind foggy yet reeling. How could this be here, at such altitude, far from trails or human habitation? No time for wonder. Consciousness ebbed. He tugged the statue free, heavier than anticipated. In that instant, the snow beside it collapsed dramatically, revealing a narrow crevice in the rock face. 80 centimeters wide, a meter high, opening into protective darkness. Without hesitation, Marcus shoved his pack inside, squeezed through dragging the sacred image, and sealed himself from the storm. The change was immediate. Wind silenced, temperature rising precious degrees in the natural shelter. A cavity perhaps 3 meters deep and 2 wide, imperfect but life-saving. With trembling limbs, he erected his emergency tent inside, massaging white, purpling fingers back to painful life, forcing down food and water. Circulation returned in agonizing waves, but it returned. Bruised, cut, but alive. Only then did he turn his headlamp toward the statue, propped in the corner. Shadows danced across the carved features, compassionate eyes seeming to gaze back. Coincidence, he insisted inwardly. Some long-ago climber lost or placed it here, buried by avalanches or drifts. Pure luck he fell upon it. Luck again that removing it triggered the collapse, exposing shelter. 2 flukes in sequence, nothing more. Yet even as rationalization formed, a quieter voice stirred, one long suppressed. In Catholic history, mountains have yielded similar discoveries. Simple statues left by faithful shepherds in the Pyrenees or Andes, becoming sites of pilgrimage when grace manifested. Our Lady has appeared or been honored in the heights, from Our Lady of the Hermitage in rugged terrains to protective icons carried by explorers. Marcus knew none of this, but as the storm raged outside and he drifted into uneasy sleep, the statue's presence filled the small space with an unspoken reassurance, as if the Mother of God herself had waited patiently in the snow for a proud son to need her. With the first faint light filtering through the crevice's narrow mouth, Marcus stirred in his makeshift shelter, the storm's fury having relented sometime in the deepest hours of night. He emerged cautiously, stepping into a world reborn under a blanket of pristine snow that muffled every sound and erased all traces of his upward path. The air hung heavy and still, the peaks silent sentinels against a clearing sky. His GPS confirmed the altitude, 4,150 meters. Descent was now imperative, down to safer elevations before his battered body gave out or another weather front closed in. Marcus packed methodically, though his bandaged hands protested every motion. Glancing at the map, his original northeast route promised a longer but gentler slope, familiar from planning. Yet something tugged at him, an instinct, perhaps born of the night's ordeal, to veer west instead. It was steeper, more demanding, laced with technical challenges he would normally avoid in compromised condition. Without overthinking, he followed the pull, his boots crunching into the fresh powder as he began the careful downward traverse. The next 3 hours tested his reserves. Exposed ridges where a misstep could mean a fatal slide, narrow ledges demanding precise footwork. Yet the path unfolded manageably, the mountain yielding just enough for progress. By midday, he paused on a rocky outcrop for water, muscles aching but spirits steady. He believed the worst lay behind him. Day 4 brought the descent's crux, a 30-meter vertical wall requiring rappel. routine for Marcus, who had executed hundreds flawlessly. He secured an anchor in solid rock, double-checked every knot and harness clip, then began the controlled slide, rope feeding smoothly through his belay device. Halfway down, at 15 meters, disaster struck without warning. The rope snapped at the anchor, clean through. Time dilated in that horrifying instant. A guttural scream caught in his throat as freefall seized him. 1 meter, 2. This was the end, his mind flashed. Then, inexplicably, it halted. The impact expelled air from his lungs in a whoosh, but he dangled there, swaying gently, alive. Heart thundering, he craned upward. The main line hung severed, frayed and whipping in the breeze. Yet his segment had snagged on a protruding ledge, a slim outcrop no wider than a handspan. The physics defied logic. The fall's angle, the rope's twist mid-plunge, the precise catch on that improbable perch. It shouldn't have happened, couldn't have by any calculation. Marcus hung suspended for 5 full minutes, breath ragged, mind reeling. Finally, with painstaking care, he repositioned and resumed the rappel using the accidental hold, reaching solid ground where his legs buckled. Kneeling in the snow, he packed gear with shaking hands, not from cold now, but from the raw brush with mortality. The statue's discovery, the sheltering crevice, and now this. 3 interventions where death had loomed in Catholic lore. Such improbable salvations echo stories of Marian protection. Climbers in the Himalayas crediting Our Lady for guiding them through wideouts, or pilgrims in the Andes finding unexpected refuge after invoking her aid. Mary, as help of Christians, has been petitioned by those in extremes since early church days, her intercession seen as a maternal hand steering the lost. Marcus felt none of this overtly, but as he pressed onward, the quiet voice within grew insistent, whispering that luck alone couldn't explain the pattern. The descent wore on, each day grinding against his limits. By the 6th, supplies exhausted the previous evening, water alone sustained him. Legs trembled with every step, vision blurred at the edges with black spots. Hallmarks of severe fatigue verging on collapse. Base camp lay at 1,800 meters, a 4-hour push on fresh legs. In his state, 8 or more loomed. Dusk approached as he pitched his tent one final time, body a vessel of pain and depletion. Lying in the dim interior, Marcus confronted the void. For the first time since childhood, words of supplication formed. Not eloquent, not the forgotten Hail Mary, but raw. If you're out there, I need help. Please. Addressed to God, the Virgin, the cosmos, it mattered little. They were the plea of a man stripped to his core, pride yielding to desperation. Sleep claimed him fitfully, the mountain's chills seeping through despite his layers. Yet in that vulnerable surrender, something shifted, as if the heavens had been waiting for that crack in his armor. Dawn broke with a gentleness that felt almost miraculous after days of unrelenting hostility. Marcus unzipped his tent to a sky washed clean, not a cloud daring to mar the vast expanse of blue. Sunlight struck the snow with blinding intensity, turning the landscape into a sea of glittering diamonds, while the thermometer climbed to a balmy 5 degrees Fahrenheit, practically temperate after the sub-zero nightmare. The mountain, which had raged like a living adversary, now lay serene, as if granting a deliberate reprieve that he stepped out fully, blinking against the brilliance, and that was when he heard it, the distant but unmistakable thrum of rotor blades slicing through the crisp air. A helicopter, far off yet growing louder. Hands fumbling in haste, Marcus seized his emergency flares. The first arced upward in a vivid orange plume, smoke trailing straight in the still morning. He waved frantically, but distance swallowed his efforts. The second flare, his last, ignited with desperate force. This time, the aircraft banked sharply toward him. 20 minutes later, he was aboard, wrapped in a thermal blanket as a paramedic monitored his vitals with furrowed concern. The pilot glanced back. "You got lucky, Webb." Tom raised the alarm when comms went dark. "We've been grounded by weather for days. This morning opened a perfect window, 3 hours of clear skies. Enough to search and extract." Marcus, voice hoarse from disuse, managed. "Was it forecasted?" The pilot shook his head. "Not at all. Came out of nowhere. And look, clouds are already rolling back in." Peering out, Marcus watched dark masses gathering over the peaks, the brief corridor of gray sealing shut behind them. 3 hours precisely. The exact span needed to pluck him from peril. In search and rescue annals, such unpredicted windows are rare, often attributed to sheer fortune. Yet for those who believe, they echo divine timing, much like the sudden calms in Scripture or the parting skies in saints' lives. Marcus rested his head against the vibrating bulkhead, eyes closing as fragments aligned. The buried statue, the collapsing snow revealing shelter, the impossible rope snag, and now this fleeting mercy of weather. At base camp, Tom rushed forward, face etched with relief. "Marcus, thank God. We thought you were gone." He pointed toward the northeast flank, where a massive scar of white marked fresh devastation. "Avalanche hit your planned route, day 4, between 10 and 10:30 a.m. If you'd stuck to it." Marcus's blood chilled. Calculations flashed. Had he followed the original path, he would have been precisely there, precisely then, buried under tons of snow. But an unseen nudge had diverted him west, sparing him without a word. Hospitalized for 48 hours, Marcus received treatment for severe hypothermia, dehydration, and mild frostbite. Doctors marveled at his condition. Under what you described, exposure, isolation, limited resources, survival borders on improbable. "A lot of luck," the lead physician concluded. "A whole lot." Alone in the sterile room, bandaged hands idle on the sheets, Marcus stared at the ceiling as pieces finally coalesced. For distinct moments where outcome should have been fatal, yet wasn't. Luck? Coincidence? The rational scaffolding he had built his life upon cracked irreparably when the truth crystallized that it was no accident, that the Virgin Mary had intervened not once but repeatedly, even for one who had never asked, never believed. Something deep within him shattered. Tears came without warning, not the restrained drops of a grown man, but wrenching sobs that shook his frame. He wept for decades of arrogance, for walls erected so high they imprisoned him in loneliness he had mistaken for strength. He wept for the pride that insisted he needed no one, not friends, not family, not God, and for the hollow ache that pride had masked. Years of chosen isolation poured out. Missed birthdays, unanswered calls, a sister's pleas ignored because vulnerability felt like weakness. And beneath it all, grief for the boy who once knew simple prayers but buried them under layers of self-sufficiency. The nurse entering to check monitors paused, silently laying a gentle hand on his shoulder before withdrawing. 15 minutes passed before the storm subsided, leaving Marcus raw but strangely light, as if decades of armor had finally sloughed away. Gazing through the window toward a small chapel visible in the courtyard below, he felt an unfamiliar pull, a quiet invitation to step inside once able, to sit in the presence of the one who had never abandoned him, even atop the coldest heights. Discharged from the hospital a week later, Marcus returned to his sparse Denver apartment, the familiar space feeling strangely altered, as if the man who left for the mountains no longer quite fit within its walls. His gear lay in a disorganized heap in the corner, delivered by Tom days earlier. With hands still tender under fresh bandages, he unzipped the main pack carefully. There, nestled amid ropes and rations, was the wooden statue of the Virgin Mary. He lifted it gently, the oak solid and reassuring in his grasp. Crossing to the living room shelf, cluttered with dusty climbing trophies and forgotten books, he swept them aside without hesitation, placing the image at the center. Its serene face gazed out, the faded blue mantle catching faint light from the window. Marcus stared for a long while, a quiet acknowledgement settling over him. Then, impulse guiding, he scrolled through his phone to a contact untouched for years. Jennifer, his sister. For years since a meaningful exchange. Only curt holiday texts bridging the gap he had widened. The line rang 4 times. He nearly ended the call. "Marcus." Surprise colored her voice. "Are you okay?" "I'm okay, Jen. But I need to tell you something." And he did, pouring out the storm's onslaught, the brink of death, the unearthed statue, the 4 pivotal moments of grace, the rescue that defied odds. Jennifer listened without interruption, her breathing the only sound across the miles. When he finished, soft sobs reached him. "Jen, what is it?" Her voice trembled. "I prayed every day. From the moment I heard you'd gone up that mountain, I asked the Virgin Mary to protect you, to bring you back safe." Marcus's chest constricted, tears welling anew. "You prayed every day? She brought you back," Jennifer whispered. She really did. They spoke for 3 hours, the longest since teenage confidences, bridging years of silence. She shared her life, her husband's steady support, their 2 children's antics, the quiet ache of missing her brother while honoring his chosen distance. Marcus confessed his regrets, the arrogance fueling isolation, the self-imposed exile from family, the dawning realization that he craved change but feared the steps. "You've already changed," she assured softly. "Calling me, opening up, the old Marcus wouldn't have." She was right. Hanging up, Marcus sat on the couch, eyes fixed on the statue. "Thank you," he murmured, "for not giving up on me." In the months ahead, transformation unfolded gradually. Regular doctor visits monitored his recovery, fingers regaining full function, scars fading without issue. Physically mended, Marcus turned inward, exploring the faith he had long dismissed. He visited that hospital chapel, then a local parish, sitting quietly in the back during Mass, letting ancient words wash over him. 1 year after the ordeal, Marcus returned to the same base camp, gear prepped for a new ascent. Tom brewed coffee as before. Forecast shifted, the guide noted casually. Marcus accepted a mug, sitting beside him. "I'll wait." Tom nearly spilled his drink. "You?" Agreeing to delay, Marcus smiled faintly. "I've learned a few things." The expedition proceeded differently, collaborative, cautious, with a humility that invited camaraderie. He summited, but the victory felt shared, not solitary conquest. In the end, Marcus understood. It was never about feats or self-proof. It was about surrendering pride, recognizing an ever-present guardianship, even in the loneliest heights. The Virgin Mary, refuge of sinners and help of the afflicted, had reached through snow and storm to a heart encased in ice, melting barriers with maternal persistence. Her statues, scattered across history in unexpected places, from roadside shrines to mountain crevices, serve as silent reminders of heaven's nearness, drawing the lost back to love. Before we finish, I invite you to join our prayer community dedicated to the Virgin Mary, a worldwide family united in faith and hope, sharing testimonies of her maternal care. If this story has touched your heart, click below to subscribe and become part of our chain of prayer. And if you followed Marcus's journey to the end, please write in the comments, "Snow gave way." Let us witness together how many souls have been reached by this testament to Mary's enduring miracles. Share this video with someone who needs renewed hope today. May Our Lady bless and protect you and your family always. Amen.